Hello, everyone. I am here today to talk about the stellar third studio album by alternative pop artist FKA Twigs. The album is called Eusexua. I had always known of FKA Twigs' music, but I always had a hard time getting into it. When Magdalene came out in 2019, I felt like I should pay attention. Cellophane made my best songs of the year list because the music video in particular was such a standout. But the songs themselves on that record, when sampled, were just not grabbing me the way that this album is. And I do feel that I am very much overdue for a revisit on not only Magdalene, but also LP1, her first studio album 10 years ago, as well as 2022's mixtape Capri Songs. I didn't even check out those projects, and I was toying with the idea of doing it before I sat down to film this review, as I felt it might be a little disingenuous if I didn't have a frame of reference to compare her past releases to this current work. I've only ever heard people talk about her previous albums. I haven't listened to them in a real meaningful way outside of a handful of tracks from Magdalene. But here I am filming this review, still kind of unaware of the legacy that FKA Twigs is leaving, even though I do know that she has been a very experimental and avant-garde electronic artist for a minute. I think perhaps it was always a little too experimental for me. Maybe I did listen to something from LP1 years ago, and there was a reason I didn't go back, and maybe I need to again revisit because my tastes have expanded in a way that maybe 10 years ago might not have been as receptive to. But when I heard stirrings of this project last fall, particularly when I was seeing the music video, stills of it all over Twitter, back when I was still on Twitter, people were, really taking the, diva doll serve violence of the music video to heart. And it was an absolute serve that I was just like, whoa, I didn't know FKA Twigs had this in her. And so it led me to check out the title track, which had been released at the time. And as soon as I heard it, I was completely flabbergasted that I had been sleeping on this artist for so long like this. However, that being said, I do feel pretty confident in stating that this album is pretty different from her previous works, in that I would probably guess to venture to say that this is more of an accessible pop dance record than her previous forays have been. There is a alternative spirit to this record 100%, and this is definitely a boundary pushing record, genre bending record, very much an electronic experimental trip hop record. But there is a dance undertone, a pop sensibility. When Perfect Stranger came out, which was single number 2, that was even more further emphasized. I was like, has FKA Twigs ever put out a song that sounds so distinctly like something that Marina and the Diamonds could have put out? I mean, just pop perfection, super polished, very rhythmic, very clear, distinct syncopation and melody, very catchy. I was like, are some people going to think she's a sellout? Because this is very accessible. This is very radio friendly. And I'm not complaining. Because when you pair the somewhat, you could say, more bubblegum pop sound to the visuals that she is serving for the music videos, the artistry is always unmatched. And we knew this if, I had seen the Cellophane music video years ago, the one that Lil Nas X supposedly copied for his Montero video. I was not aware of Miss Twigs's game in the visual department. I mean, she is such an artiste in every way that, obviously, kudos to the creative team, the director, and all of that as well, but I know that this is all her vision. Obviously, also, Twigs comes from the dance background, so the kinetic energy of her movements is so mesmerizing and captivating, and she really knows how to sell a visual and no less probably a performance. I would love to see her perform live. The energy is unmatched. And this album is all about energy. I'm really glad I did listen to an interview that she had with one of her idols and one of my idols, Imogen Heap. They put out an interview last week in anticipation of this album's release, where Imogen interviewed Twigs and asked her about the record. And it was so interesting to see two muses of lofty creative heights kind of bonding together. You don't see that terribly often, especially in the alternative space. And so that was a really interesting, morsel to munch on, to get the creative juices flowing for me personally. And it was just so interesting to hear Twigs and Imogen bounce off of each other because they clearly both think about music in a similar way. FKA Twigs made this very clear that this album was a sort of healing exercise for her. And it was very physical as much as it was, in the mind of creating the music. She adopted these movements that she would rhythmically do as sort of like a ritual that would help her relieve stress, would help her sort of prepare herself to be in a better mind space for creating this kind of work. And I really want to give some of it a try. I mean, it was a really interesting, broad kind of scoping interview where she not only talked but also demonstrated the sort of mission that she is on with Eusexua. As she states, Eusexua is a practice. It is a state of mind. It's not just an album or one album campaign. And the more she talks about that title, I was very, very captivated, as was, of course, Miss RuPaul during that Jimmy Kimmel hosting stunt when she first dropped the title. Like, we all seen that clip. But now that I know this album, it's kind of sad that it's been trivialized by like that. But that's, if you look at how Björk has been treated by mainstream media for years, she's always a laughing stock or a butt of a joke. And when alternative artists want to do something very out of left field and, kind of out there, that's how the mainstream media is going to react. And we have to laugh along with it. But it's also, there is so much meaning, so much depth, and I think so much power to what eusexual means. When combining the idea of euphoria and sex into a word that sounds so delicious, I just love saying it. I think it is probably one of my favorite album titles, at least of this decade so far, if not of the last 10 years. I've never made an album titles ranking video, but if I do, this one's going to be up there. This is one of those titles I really wish I could have snagged because I'm just like, this is brilliant. The unapologetic, living in the moment, living in your confidence, being sexual, being present in the moment, being feral. These are things that are espoused, and I do not think done in a way that feels dirty or like a little scandalous. It's very artful and refined in the way FKA Twigs engages with sex. And that's, I think, a theme throughout all of her music, from what I understand. There is just such art in everything she does. So you can't look at a music video where she is dancing a certain way and compare it to something, Cardi B might do. If it's twerking, it's very artful and considered twerking. Everything about the movements, the makeup, the costuming, the cinematography, and of course, the music is so well considered and so artful. I love pretty much every single song on this project. I was really nervous that I would only like maybe the big singles because I was worried maybe those were the radio-friendly ones and that the rest of the album would be too out there, amelodic, cacophonous, a little like, something I'd have a hard time digesting. I really lamented that, for example, I couldn't get into Sophie's 2018 record for that reason. I really appreciated it, but it was so cacophonous and hard to and it's interesting because, Imogen Heap talks about in the interview with FKA Twigs, noise as music and noise as meditation. And perhaps I've been thinking about like noise music wrong all this time. But for me, melody and harmony and proper syncopation and beats and time signatures, these are important things. But maybe they don't have to be when you like change your way of listening to music. But for now, I prefer music that's a little bit more accessible, something you can bob your head to. And I was very happy to see that this album, for the most part, is through and through considered in that department. It's a strange record. There are times where she goes in completely unexpected directions, which I love. It just keeps you on your toes. I would say Perfect Stranger is probably the only true pop song in that it's so traditional in that sense. There isn't anything that avant-garde or experimental about the production or, the way that track is composed. Everything else is free form. There's, much more abandon with the chorus verse, kind of chorus verse chorus structure. And something Imogen picks up on, which I think is very much noticeable, particularly on the song Sticky, is the way she distorts the time of the song by, slowing things down, distorting her vocal to the point where it feels like we're screeching to a halt or we're in static and then releasing again. And there's something about that sort of sudden pent up kinetic energy then being released. So it keeps the movement so dynamic. The movement of time on this record is very, catch and release. And so that stands out. And of course, there's distinction between going into heavy bass drops and break beats and lighter percussive instrumental. There's almost harp sounding sounds on Keep It, Hold It. I don't know if it's a harp or if it's some sort of harpsichord-esque instrument, but there is some beautiful keyboard/string work that illustrates the melody that is so Kate Bushian. I will say something that obviously did stick out to me was, especially since I'm newer to FKA Twigs' work, there were so many moments that reminded me of other artists, and not in a derivative way, just in a fun, like, oh, that's a Kate Bush moment, or that's an Aurora moment. For example, Björk comes to mind, obviously, particularly, and a lot of critics have pointed out, on the industrial Room of Fools. One can be reminded of songs like Violently Happy off of her debut, or in the wailing at a party, the rave aesthetic coming from There's More to Life Than This. There's definitely an abandon to her vocal delivery that echoes the way Björk was, particularly in her early career, when she was against those sort of more electronic beats. And at first it was a little jarring. The tonality of her voice, the richness of her vocal, the beautiful soprano that she houses within, and the multitude of vocal dynamic and delivery that is on display is astounding. I really, really will always appreciate a dance pop artist who knows how to make techno, but also knows how to sing, especially if they've got a lofty soprano. Because there are moments on Girl Feels Good, on Room of Fools, on Striptease. There are moments where Wanderlust, where she really knows how to, use her voice as that extra element of, ethereal dimension to the undertow and pulse of the song. And it really calls to mind for me what William Orbit did for Madonna on Ray of Light. Yes, that is another huge reference that I think is pretty clear, if not the most clear, on Girl Feels Good, which I will say off the jump is probably either my second or most favorite song on the record. I'm kind of torn between the title track and Girl Feels Good. They are both so stellar to me. Eusexua was featured on my best songs of the year list in 2024. And so Girl Feels Good definitely would deserve a spot in there as well. And I could definitely see William Orbit being behind the production, even though he isn't. Corliss, who she works with on most of this record, Corliss, let's not sleep on what you can bring. The fire is there. As well as Oji Volta. This is a call to boys, beautiful boys, to listen to your mother's, sisters, your lover's heart. That is where there is healing. When a girl feels good, it makes the world go round. So there's a cry to a sort of universalist message of unity, celebrating unashamed femininity that is so euphoric and being so celebrated on this record. And the same can be said for the title track. Wonder how you feel. Words cannot describe this feeling deep inside. King-sized, I'm vertical sunrised, like flying capsized. Free, I see you are, Eusexua. Do you feel alone? You're not alone. And if they ask you, say you feel it, but don't call it love. Eusexua. Yeah, the way you describe, wonder if you see, the way you describe it, baby, can change the course of time. Eusexua is not easily defined because it is so all-encompassing. Uttermost freedom. Don't just call it love. That's such a limiting designation. Drums of Death has been described as sort of like a deconstructivist industrial glitch pop track. And I think that's the best way to describe something like this. Um, it is very much a standout on the record for the tempo and for the bombastity. Is that a word? I'm not sure. I'm making it one. The high octane nature of the track. Perhaps I was expecting a little bit more of the album to crush as hard as this does. It definitely does call to mind some of what Grimes has been trying to do, although I would argue that some of this is more successful than Grimes when she goes into this punk industrial glitch pop stuff. It's just so clean and it just shreds. Like, I don't know how to explain it. I mean, it's heavy metal for, electro glitch pop fans, and I will always be here for it, even though it's so distorted and uncanny. And you just want to like completely surrender with abandon on the dance floor too. Like I said, Room of Fools has a somewhat uncanny melody over a industrial pulsating beat that at first feel a little discordant, but with a few more listens start to gel together. And then transcends into what feels like a very Eastern sort of nod to a transcendent state of being, where she allows her vocals to kind of go in a completely different direction. She sounds like she's some sort of pagan, witchy, earthen banshee. It actually reminds me, this is a little bit obscure, but there's this band of like sort of pagan witchy female musicians called Fawn Fables. And I was listening to some of their songs, and the vocal she has at the end of this really was reminiscent of the sort of the folk yodel, I guess, the folk pagan witchy yodel that they adopt. Keep It, Hold It, like I said, has such a Kate Bush energy to it. In the drama of the two layers of the chorus, with the more suspended higher notes and the rooted, stern delivery of keep it, hold it, don't let it go. Just keep it walking, hold it close. Is that your truth? Is that what we're talking about? Your inner light, your inner truth? Sometimes I want to turn the other way. Sometimes I feel so empty where I lay. And at best I live alone in disarray. I bet a million people got to feel this way. They speak of me like I'm not in the room. They say I mess up way more than I do. I often look at windows for escape, to be safe. So, I mean, this is something that, in the face of insecurity, you have to hold true to, your own confidence, that you are on the right path, that you are channeling what you're supposed to be doing. And in the bridge, sometimes I feel like I'm not even trying. Sometimes I feel miles away. That's when my feet start dancing away. To dry your eyes. You've got to be from something true to feel this strong and wild. It's in your eyes. It's through sheer willpower, willing yourself to believe in your truth and in your power to manifest your own reality. That's truly what I'm getting from this. And there's always dance. Dance is always going to be another healing force. And that's illustrated also on Striptease. But before we get there, let's just shout out Childlike Things. Again, one of the more, I think, accessible Grimes sounding tracks, but it also has a little bit of a Asian flair for it. Interestingly, Northwest, yes, Kim Kardashian's daughter, features on the track singing in Japanese, which, it's a strange collaboration, maybe not so strange, because I do think, Kanye has probably been connected to FKA Twigs in the past. I hope that FKA Twigs is not effing around with Kanye today. I don't think that they share any sort of viewpoint on politics or that controversy that Kanye seems to want to embroil himself in. But there's been a connection. And so it is interesting that a Kardashian would feature on a record that is so non-mainstream in a way. And I guess I actually kind of appreciate that, because it shows that Northwest is being exposed to women with taste, female artists of taste. I'd much rather this than North featuring on other projects. So I guess slay for that. Uh, Kim is doing something right, making North listen to FKA Twigs. I cannot see Kim Kardashian listening to FKA Twigs, but this is a more accessible pop record. I mean, stranger things have happened. Striptease, which just got a music video actually just at the album release, is this haunting, sensual meditation that is so titillating. I feel like there's definitely some pent up sexual energy on a lot of these songs. I've got a birthmark on my mind. I think you'll like it. Is probably one of the standout lines for me that is just cut right through. Late nights, my sternum stretched wide. I mean, there's definitely, sexual allusions, but I think it's also a lot of it metaphor. Opening me feels like a striptease, silk for my tears and lace for my fears. I'm stripping apart till my pain disappears. And so, there's definitely, and if you allude to Perfect Stranger, there's definitely a desensitization to sex that can happen when you talk about sex as being sort of just an act of pleasure and nothing else. But I don't think that she's completely deconstructing sex to be something so mundane, more so that it is also about breaking free from boundaries and liberation. And sometimes it's, I think, more being read as a metaphor, literally being in a striptease position. But I think that, you could also read it as sometimes there is just something so rejuvenating to sex with a perfect stranger. And I mean, she clearly spells it out on that song. And so I wouldn't be surprised if like part of the healing process for her, coming off of probably a very traumatic breakup. Wasn't she with Robert Pattinson? That's what I felt like I kept hearing her name kind of floating around in the pop spaces. They had like a very nasty breakup or something. So she's been single and feeling herself in these clubs and raves in Prague, where this album was mostly recorded. And so there is a healing element to, and if you can turn, sort of wild and untamed nights out into a healing kind of cathartic experience, then I guess it's done its job. We do need to be careful. We don't do this all the time, but I'm not going to shame someone. But I read more of this as a metaphor, to just getting to know someone in those early stages. Because so often and it's illustrated in the music video, she feels like she's on display. She's literally in the middle of in a busy tunnel in a road where everyone can look at her and gawk and look at her body. And so in being in the spotlight as an artist, it feels like you're being, surveyed all the time and broken apart and stripped down. And so reclaiming that and sort of owning that, like, yeah, I know people are going to look at me. They're going to say I'm a beautiful woman. They're going to see what they're going to see. And I need to be confident in that. And so I think the music video illustrates her sort of subverting that and taking it and running with it. It's like, this is me. Watch me flow, lost in my own striptease, as I striptease for my own mind. It's kind of almost like the subversion there. I feel so alive right now because I've claimed ownership over something that at one time probably felt, when I was less confident with myself, very degrading. 24-Hour Dog, I will say, and this is probably a hot take, 24-Hour Dog, if there was one song on the record that I would perhaps skip sonically, there's always one, it would be this one. I think it does the least for me in terms of, the pop construction is not there. There was not a lot of emphasis on that. And it's a sleepier track. It's vibing out to some synth notes. It was interesting hearing her talk about how the song was formed. She spends a lot of time talking about this song in the Imogen Heap interview, which I was kind of like, girl, there are songs I'd rather you talked about because this is probably my least favorite. But this is not a bad record, and no song on this record is bad. Okay, please do not get it twisted. It's just some I'm going to prefer more than others. Um, but I definitely, in the lyrical idea of talking about submission, um, what do you want me to do? Anything you wish for. I'm a slave to your design. So work me to satisfy the core of your mind. Your love chores distract me from my worst flaws, setting free the softest part of me. Gets dangerous sometimes. Feel guilty that it's getting me high. I mean, I think that there's definitely moments where, particularly, a woman might feel a little icky about being so down bad for a guy in a way in which she's like, I'd do anything for you. And we all, I mean, I can relate as a gay man. There are men that I would let do things to me where I'm like, ooh, the ethics part of my brain needs to shut down for a minute. The higher reasoning parts, because this is not necessarily healthy. But there's moments where we want to submit, and sometimes, if we're careful, as long as we don't let things go too far, if we trust the other individual, maybe there's a way that can be healthily exercised. And so I think that's what she's ruminating on here, because she's clearly down bad, and she's been down bad. And so this is something I think we can all relate to very strongly. It's dangerous how much I want you. Yeah, we feel that. And then we close out with Wanderlust, which is this, elegiac, sweeping, beautiful melody that rises up over a little bit of a techno beat that comes in. It doesn't come in quite as much as I would like, but it comes in a bit. She's reflecting on, I think when she says the film was brazy, that's what Genius says. Is she talking about Shooting the Crow? Which, by the way, I'd heard that film was awful. It came out in August with Bill Skarsgård. She got a Razzie nomination for that movie last week. So not Lady Gaga was not the only pop star to get a Razzie nomination last week. FKA Twigs did as I think Jennifer Lopez got one as well for a Netflix movie. But yeah, I did notice that FKA Twigs got a Razzie nomination. Oops. Well, good thing she's not, we're focusing on this album. But yeah, she's reflecting in the moment, I think, when she's making the album. She's talking about like where she's been, her state of mind. No makeup on my face, filter covered up my lows. If I don't wake up Monday morning, I'll make it up to you. Like it's at a low place, but yearning for that escape, which I think she is yearning for Eusexua. I mean, she's calling it Wanderlust, but she talks about how much Eusexua saved her life. And I think that Wanderlust is a big kind of synonym for that. I mean, it's the place you're pining for, escape when you don't have the connection to yourself that Eusexua provides. And so that's the point of view that she is at right before Eusexua comes in. It's like a circle. The album ends right before the beginning point. Starts up again, and you're sort of introduced to the concept and the feeling. I see my life in motion, mistakes in motion, misplaced emotions. You've got one life to live, do it freely. It's a mantra, you tell yourself. It's your choice to break or believe in it. I'll be in my head if you need me. Ain't that the truth? Although I'm in my head far too often. I'm just absolutely blown away. I really would be interested to break down. She talked about 11 pillars for this album, and there's 11 songs. And I'm presuming each track represents one pillar. And so thinking of that as like an element. And so I'd be really interested to see more of that broken down. And if anyone in the comments has more information on how each song correlates to a specific element of Eusexua and practice. But if I were to interpret it myself, I would argue that, Eusexua is the primal pillar. But then, a bunch of them, I don't know if I could individually pinpoint. Some are very much about, confidence against insecurity. Some are very much about sexual pleasure. Some are about regret and remorse. Some are just purely about dance and movement, like Room of Fools, for example, and Drums of Death. Childlike things, appreciating childlike wonder. Travel for Wanderlust. I feel like I sort of can see, and sex in Perfect Stranger. I can see, where these sort of elements are sort of manifesting, but I'd be curious to have a much more clear breakdown of that. I'm tired of messing up my life with overcomplicated moments and sticky situations. I tried to fuck you with the lights on in the hope you'd think I'm open and have a conversation. That's a very fascinating observation. Feeling watched when you're in such a vulnerable position, with the harshness and brutality of the lights. I mean, that is a very compromising position, and there's a power play here that she's not comfortable with, that she feels has been taken advantage of. I mean, this sticky is where she's kind of at the lowest, I feel, some ways, partly also in Wanderlust. So I feel like those two songs kind of represent that low. But yeah, what a fascinating project. I really, I'm excited for, I feel like, she's a slow working artist. And Capra Songs was technically a mixtape. It wasn't like an official album. And this is her first album with, released under a major label, Atlantic. So I don't know if I would necessarily expect new music from her so soon. I think that, she's very much focused on 11 very well crafted tracks that some of them are quite long. And so I feel like for the most part, this album feels like a lot of time and effort was placed into it rather than something that was rushed to feed an algorithm. And it's really refreshing to hear art like that and to start off the year with such an unapologetic, inspiring, orally titillating project from an artist that I wasn't even checking for. So I love when that happens. It gives me a lot of hope for 2025 as we kick off the year with an album like this. It is already my album of the year. Like, I actually do think that this album is going to stand toe to toe with whatever else we're going to get. I mean, this is a tremendous body of work, and I'm seeing a lot of praise, luckily, from a wide variety of sources. So what are your thoughts on this tremendous body of work? And I hope that you enjoyed my own. I'll see you all in my next video. Please give this a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new here for more album reviews, and me blabbing on about pop music. And I will see you all in my next video. Peace, love, and light. Bye.